Chair Ryan, you're live.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask the secretary to take roll, please.
Chair Ryan,
Present.
Regent Balducci,
Here.
Regent Bloom,
Present.
Student Regent Galais. Absence is noted. Regent Guay,
Present.
Regent James,
Present.
Regent Jappanen,
Present.
Regent McCarthy,
Present.
Regent Porth. Absence is noted. Student Regent Sanchez. Absence is noted. Regent Santiago. Regent Stewart. Absence is noted for both. Regent Wright. Absence is noted. Regent Yang.
Here.
Thank you. Chair Ryan, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank the members of the Faculty Advisory Committee, Dr. Kalina Sanker and Dr. David Blitz, for putting today's agenda together. As we want to leave plenty of time for discussion and dialogue, I'd like to ask Dr. Sanker to introduce our first presentation.
Thank you, Chair Ryan. And the first presentation would be me. So let's start there. I'm going to be a little lengthy today, and mostly just because this is also a forum for the public, and I'd like to make sure that the full picture is told. But I'm going to address the issue of recurring state funding. So in 2017, two things happened. The state's fiscal guardrails were tightened and the Students First plan was unleashed, promising savings from the community college sector of the CSCU system. The context was a serious debt crisis at the state level and a 123-day stalemate during which the state operated without a budget. Things looked dismal and the CSCU system pledged to do its part by consolidating in the pursuit of efficiencies. The budget of the community college was targeted because we could, but no substantive conversation about whether we should was engaged. However, at the body entrusted with the oversight at the system, not a single region asked questions at the BOR meeting at which the Students First consolidation plan was approved. No one even questioned its claims regarding savings and timing. As a result, here we are today moving resolutely backward on a trajectory that would only magnify the existing racial and economic inequality in the state. It was taken for granted that it was reasonable to ask the CSCU system to cut its funding in 2017. So let's look at that assumption using the reasoning that underlies the justification for further funding reductions 5 years later. In the decade leading up to the consolidation decision, the system had already suffered years of cuts if measured in real dollars. Between 2007 and 2017, adjusted for inflation, system funding had decreased by 9.1%. During that same time period, enrollment had increased by 8.6%. 2 years on, in 2019, enrollment had dipped down a bit, but was still up by 4.5% relative to 2007. Recurring state funding, however, was down by 18.76% measured in 2007 dollars. Though enrollment is much lower in 2023 than in 2007, adjusting for inflation, funding decreased by an even larger increment. So the system never really recovered from the Great Recession, and it's likely that our failure to recover has had consequences for the state's recovery more generally. A lot has happened between 2020 and today, both in the world and in one-time funding regarding our system, and I'm going to address the issue of one-time funding separately. But in 2019, we were 12 years into dwindling funding in the face of rising enrollment, and that took a toll. Today in 2023, we were told that because of the expected enrollment decreases due to demographic trends that are not straightforwardly applicable to the significant non-traditional student population in the system, we must pare back to anchors set by these pre-pandemic funding levels as our one-time funds are weaned away over the next few years. But those levels were unacceptable. In addition to the depleted pre-pandemic block grant levels, a 2023 fringe benefit restructure reduces state funding even further in a way that threatens to escalate as time goes on and which affects the community colleges particularly severely. For CSCU as a whole, in fiscal year 2024, fringe costs are 4.3 times what they were in 2007. They are 2.65 times what they were at CSCU's inception in 2011. They are 34% higher, about $33 million more than the highest net cost in the past 5 years. And I believe in, let's say, the past 2 decades, but I have to confirm that. For the community college, this fiscal year's fringe costs are almost twice as much, 40 million, as they were at their highest point in 2019, which was 23 million. The fringe cost restructure adopted in the legislative session of 2023 left non-retirement fringe to be paid by the CSCU block grant, while the state covers the retirement portion directly. It's advertised as budget neutral, but clearly that's not the case. If CT state fringe projections are correct, the fringe restructure represents a cut of tens of millions. The state's Office of Policy and Management claims that the system must be prepared to return to pre-pandemic levels of funding, and that because of declining enrollment, we should be able to do so without increasing tuition. Based on the measures quoted by Budget Director Beckham, it appears that 2019, a record low point in state support, is the level to which he is anchored. Factoring in the new cost of fringe recurring funding in 2024, fiscal year 2024, excluding one-time funds, is significantly lower than even that low point. On November 15th, institutions in the system presented mitigation plans, and the shortfall in fiscal year 2024 has been eliminated entirely by a variety of measures, including some terminations of non-permanent workers. But about $47.6 million in deficit remains for 2025, and CT State and Western are the worst off. CT State proposes to eliminate even more educational assistants who staff our labs, tutoring centers, libraries, and virtually every student services area in the college. It aims to reduce course offerings to save adjunct costs by 776 courses. Because the community college workforce is about 75% contingent workers, non-renewals of these contracts can be accomplished without much fanfare, but reductions since July 1st, 2023 have already impacted the most vulnerable directly. So this is a death plan, not a survival plan. OPM justifies our funding by enrollment, and we've put forward a plan that sabotages both enrollment and retention. Its consequences would justify further cuts the next time around, but it really just doesn't seem that anything better is possible within the budget's great constraints we've been given. These planned reductions in staffing come after the reductions already made and felt since July 1st, 2023, and after 5 years of Students First, during which 34.5 million was captured by leaving vacated positions open. We have already cut our workforce significantly. And this was all after a decade, from 2007 to 2017, of block grant erosion when accounting for inflation. So today, OPM claims that funding should be reduced to respond to a declining traditional age student population. In the previous 5 years, funding was to be reduced to achieve equity and anti-racism through consolidation, a claim that is contradictory on its face. In the decade before that, funding was reduced in spite of increasing enrollment. The state's position on higher education appears only ever to be to reduce support. None of the various justifications underlying that conclusion should be regarded in good faith and engaged seriously. The population CSCU benefits is the portion of the state that is also the most heavily tax burdened. They deserve quality services. In 2017, it targeted the public higher education population with the largest percentage of non-white students, the highest percentage of first-generation students, the largest percentage of students in poverty to bear the brunt of the downsizing. The CSCU system complied and added insult to injury by marketing the structural adjustments to accommodate reductions in services to an already disproportionately underserved population as some sort of accomplishment in the service of those that would hurt the most. I hope it's evident that this is a position that the current board and system leadership cannot responsibly take. And until we aspire to mere equality or adequacy or viability for all of our institutions, there should be no talk of equity, which is a higher standard at the board level. This is a system with aspirations appropriate maybe to the 1950s in a state that cannot figure out how to desegregate its capital city's schools and has just devastated the colleges that bridge the gap between those largely underfunded schools and the possibility of college. A future where all one-time funding is stripped away to 2019 levels is one that is unsustainable. And this focus on recurring funding matters because of the spending cap. The rate at which it is sustained, the way that it's done, it can only increase incrementally. And after it was tightened in 2017, the dollar amount of our block grant actually dipped down initially. So it's a measure of the state's commitment to our future. So a conversation about public higher ed that only ever proceeds from arbitrary historical levels of funding, despite a disappointing status quo, is unacceptable. We have only ever been talking
that other
about the
room and they're
state's
bringing
budget.
people in.
A conversation about public higher ed has to be had, and funding targets should be anchored to the needs of the people in the state. The conversation should include consideration of income inequality in the state, racial inequality in the state, our inability to desegregate K through 12, increased needs post-pandemic, an exceptionally wide range of student preparedness given more school districts than there are towns, and non-traditional students, the challenges of the transition of the consolidation, workforce needs, especially teacher and nursing shortages, the open enrollment nature of community colleges, as well as their many disparate functions, the needs of working adults with families, the high cost of living in the state that makes food insecurity and houselessness a constant threat for so many of our students and employees, the realities of other public services, including public transport in our state. As far as one-time funds, to keep block grant levels equal to 2007, adjusting for inflation, it would have had to be about $440 million in 2023. Including one-time funds, the system received $505 million, a little over $505 million. The costs and challenges introduced by the pandemic are ongoing, but we have to tell the story of what else this excess is being used for. In the current year, 2024, the system received about $578.5 million total, including one-time funds. In 2025, total funding matches 2007 levels when you include one-time funds, but with $76 million scheduled to disappear the following year. We must give an account of how the money is used if we're going to make the strongest arguments for funding. Certainly, the pandemic has the ongoing costs and challenges, but the missing piece of the puzzle is the cost of consolidation. Accomplishing what was the largest merger of its kind to create the largest community college in New England had to have cost something. Much of it was spent, I'm sure, building a consolidated college that wasn't designed to address the issues of the colleges, our students, or the state. We can, with great effort, wrangle it into the thing it ought to be now, but not without resources. Faculty and staff governance across the state opposed it, knowing its savings and enrollment projections to be preposterous. All the unions in the system opposed it. Consider this quote from page 10 of the June 2021 board packet. In fiscal year 24, as COVID relief funds expire, the additional tuition revenue of $18.5 million exceeds the cost of Guided Pathways Advising. By fiscal year 25, Guided Pathways Advising is self-supporting. We hired these Guided Pathways advisors on one-time COVID relief money, and no one questioned this decision, right? Stephen Adair and Frank Cohn will address ways to understand this discrepancy between what was necessary, what was expected, and what was needed. But the argument here is, the number of executives who have no role to play has increased, and the argument is not that the cost of managerial salaries has caused the budgetary shortfall, but rather that we have to make sure that we have our focus in the right place, right? And I'm just going to stop there and give it to Stephen to talk about one way of sort of making sense of perhaps the cost of consolidation. Thanks all. Where's Stephen?
Yeah, thank you, Kalina. Appreciate the FAC inviting me to be here, and thank you to the board too for allowing me to speak. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephen Adair. I'm a professor of sociology at CCSU, and from 2013 to 2018, I was in the chair that Dave Blitz now occupies, representing the state universities. So I just have a brief report, which I believe that you have, sort of reviewing the cost of the consolidation. And when the consolidation was first announced in 2017, there was clearly a simple method that was being used to try to document what was the projected savings. An organizational chart, which was actually never shared publicly, it wasn't shared with the board, I don't believe, but nevertheless made the case that the new college would require 163 fewer non-teaching FTE staff members to operate. The projected savings were determined by adding up the salaries and fringe costs in fiscal year 2018 for the 163 positions. The total came to $27.8 million of annual savings, an average cost of $170,000 for salary and fringe for each FTE position. For a time, the system office continued to update the board on the progress toward the projected savings target, but now that method seems to be wholly forgotten and completely abandoned. The fact that the BOR and the system office have not expressed any interest in determining the savings or the cost of the consolidation is both surprising and concerning for the following reasons. The BOR is the fiduciary for the system, and as such, it should regularly and transparently monitor the fiscal consequences of its own decision. The state legislature has expressed its interest by passing legislation that requires regular reporting on the savings or the cost of the consolidation. AGB advises higher education boards to engage in periodic self-assessments, which seemingly ought to include a sober review of the most consequential decision that this board has made. IPEDS expects systems to report on the financial impacts of institutional mergers. Across New England and the country, many state systems are considering institutional mergers to reduce administrative costs. Honest dissemination of the results in Connecticut would be an expression of a good citizenry that would help inform decision-making elsewhere. And finally, the completion of the consolidation has not resulted in the greater fiscal stability that was predicted, but instead it seems to have precipitated a statewide, system-wide financial crisis that is most acute for the one community college. Ironically, Connecticut's OPM is telling the CSU system we need to restructure to live within our means, just as a restructuring is completed that was promised to get us to just such a place. If the savings target for the consolidation had been realized, even approximately, then the system office and the BOR would have great interest in documenting this achievement. Its absence, therefore, invites the inference that the actual costs are wide of the forecasted targets. Using publicly available documents, it's not possible for us to be able to accurately calculate the savings or the cost of the consolidation. The original quantification, however, was based on a projection of that the consolidation would be completed by August 2019. After NEAS failed to approve that consolidation plan, the administration acknowledged that the consolidation would take longer and that the existing 12 colleges would need to retain their respective accreditations until the consolidated was completed by the summer of 2023. The revised plan still promised an eventual reduction of 163 FTE positions to realize the same targeted savings, but it also stated that the savings would need to be completed in 3 phases. Time horizons and the defining criteria for the 3 phases were never specified. The June 2018 update did imply that some reductions in savings would occur each year as the system moved toward that consolidated college. In the graph that's available in the paper document that you have, the projected staffing reductions of non-teaching faculty and the initial quantification are represented by the yellow line and then the tan line respectively, the tan line following from the 2018 revision. And the tan line, I just simply average what that reduction would be over the course from 2018 to 2025. So it just appears as a straight line of the declining numbers of non-faculty staff. It would be simple for the system office to compare these staff projections with the actual staff levels. Ben Barnes, however, did share with the Faculty Advisory Committee a spreadsheet from May 2023 that showed the number of full-time employees at the community colleges working in shared services, working at the system office for the community colleges from 2019 with an estimate through to 2024. The blue line on the graph represents the total number of classified, administrative, and managerial professional full-time employees at the community colleges and those working for the community colleges and shared services and the system office. Between 2019 to 2023, the number of full-time, non-faculty staff increased from 1145 to 1384, an increase of 240 positions when what had been predicted was a reduction of 163. Over the same time frame, the number of full-time faculty members declined nearly 100. These data alone don't provide a definitive basis for determining a total cost of the consolidation, but they do provide substantial evidence that the consolidation cost the state of Connecticut many tens of millions of dollars. Some additional just observations and caveats about that. We do not have data to compare staffing levels in 2019 with what they had been in 2017. It's possible to suppose that some reductions between 2017 and 2019 partially offset the increases after 2020. The early projections for savings associated with the consolidation were based on reductions in FTE non-faculty staff, while the data provided by Barnes to the FAC listed full-time and part-time positions. The graph only presents the data for full-time employees, and the results might appear somewhat different if the data were converted into FTE employees. The original consolidation plan pledged to maintain faculty positions while reducing administrative staff. Indeed, President Ojekian often promised that he hoped to be able to hire additional faculty by reducing the cost of administration. In 2019, the ratio of staff to faculty was 1.24. In 2023, the ratio had risen to 1.66. This irony should not be lost. The decline in full-time faculty positions over the last 4 years might be regarded as a reasonable and necessary response to the sharp drop in enrollments at the community colleges. If so, then, would it not then also be reasonable to suppose that the number of non-faculty staff would also drop accordingly? And if so, the size of the increase in the non-faculty staff is even considerably greater in light of the decline in enrollments. And there's then reason for thinking that in 2023, the amount of extra costs might be as much as $60 million associated with additional costs associated with the consolidation. We don't have the data to determine a total cost of the consolidation, but given, of course, the data that the system office has, it's easy to imagine how it is that that could have been done. But this board and the system office has not even acknowledged that the consolidation came at a considerable amount of cost. And to be honest, I'll just share, I mean, I think that that's a political error. Certainly the governor's office bought into the idea of the consolidation and backed President Ojeki and then President Chang in the making of that consolidation. It seems untoward for the governor's office now to walk away from the very plan that it had promised. But at the same time, it requires, I think, that this board and the system office acknowledge what the cost of that consolidation had been. Thank you.
Brendan, are you going to go next?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. I just have a few slides. I don't think this will take too long. I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to share my view as an economist who has published on the topic of the economics of higher education. My presentation focuses specifically on the CSUs, the state universities themselves, and I'd like to share how I view the data that's emerging from those institutions quite a bit differently than many others who often offer commentary on that data. I think it shows that we've achieved two things over a fairly long period of time, which is an increase in efficiency, and higher equity in the state. And I fail to see why certain elected officials have decided to punish those outcomes with less funding. So in discussion of sort of the educational process, I often hear people alluding to some kind of production process on university campuses. And if we are going to go with that sort of analogy or metaphor, we have to define that production process properly. This omits a lot, but if we want to go this route, the way you would think about it is as inputs, we bring in high school graduates. And as outputs at the CSUs, we offer college graduates. Now, there's almost a fixation, an obsession with one fact, particularly from elected officials and people who speak on their behalf, which is that we are bringing in fewer inputs. We are bringing in fewer high school graduates, and that is a fact. But, we need to take a more holistic view for what the educational process is all about at our universities. And the second fact, which very few people seem to discuss, is the fact that we are graduating roughly just as many students as we have in the past. That is a relatively stable outcome since 2010. And I would like to commend my colleagues for achieving this in the light of instability and uncertainty that has been described by my colleagues in the two presentations before this one. Now, if we were a restaurant and you considered fact 1 and fact 2, we would conclude that we are actually improving how we're operating, right? We're serving the same number of meals, but we're bringing in fewer raw ingredients. And that is actually an efficiency gain. Right? You can see this achievement through the positive trend in graduation rates across all 4 CSU campuses. This is an outcome that should be rewarded, not punished. Now, non-educators see this improvement as a failure. The reason is they don't really look at it, and they have a short-term prioritization of money over education and equity and the things we want Connecticut to achieve beyond money. The other problem, I think, is that the inputs we use in this process pay money to the process, and that is certainly different than a restaurant, and it makes it hard for people to sort of think about what's happening. So continuing with the non-educator view of how we operate, and these are not the actual percentages on the CSU campuses, but there is widespread understanding that there are 2 major sources of revenue, the state and the students. Now, non-educators and also certain elected officials have adopted a somewhat exploitative view of what should happen when this picture changes. Again, some seem to think that the state share should not grow if student payments decline. The claim is that state payment should decline in turn. The goal seems to be to maintain some sort of arbitrary share of revenue sources. And I don't think I've ever heard anyone seriously ask what these shares should actually look like on our campuses. Why is that view exploitative? We need to unpack the revenues earned from our students. There's a crisis across higher education in the United States consisting of non-graduates who are indebted. They leave colleges and universities, have to pay the cost of attending, and do not have the credential that helps them earn the money that helps them repay their debt. Those individuals subsidize the education of the graduates. That is an unfair process. It is exploitative. The good news is, and it reinforces inequality, the good news is less of this is happening on our campuses now because more of the students who come here are graduating. This is actually a desirable outcome. This is actually different than what's happening on a lot of other campuses. So just to conclude, CSU completion rates are higher than they've ever been before, generally. This is something that should be rewarded. This is something the state should support more of. We have fewer indebted non-graduates than in the past. That enhances equity in our state. I fail to see why our governor would want to slash funding in response to those achievements. Is the goal to restore the exploitative model of the past? If so, we should do everything to avoid that return. Thank you for your time.
Cool. Fran, Litz, or Kalina, do you?
I believe it's Fran Cohn. Are you there? Oh, yeah, there you are. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted, I think.
Thank
Fran.
you. I just noticed that. Thank you. I want to thank my FAC colleagues for inviting me today, and the board also for giving me a chance to present what's a small study of enrollment projections for the system for the past decade. I'm going to try to share the, if I can find it. I don't know if I can find it. The graph, which is at the heart of the study. And if I can't find it, I will do without in the interest of time. Oh, geez. Okay. Well, I'm not going to waste time trying to find it here. But if one looks at enrollment projections, so this isn't enrollment numbers. We know enrollment has undergone a pretty steady decline over the last decade and was, devastated by COVID. We already know that. But what was striking and looking, and what I did in the study is look through system numbers, mainly reports of the finance committee and projections. In the past 10 years, only once did the community colleges achieve their enrollment projections, only once. And that was in 2018. The CSUs only twice. But I'm going to focus on the community colleges because the CSU's projections were in the ballpark, at least, most years. The community colleges, though, have consistently missed their enrollment projections with pretty significant negative results. So if you want the numbers, and again, they're in the report, but it adds up to over 12,000 FTE in 10 years for the community colleges. That's, again, the gap between the projection and the reality that was realized. So there's a consistent underestimate of enrollment that's gone on, particularly for the community colleges. And I've attended enough board meetings and committee meetings and read minutes and so on and so forth. I've never seen anybody ask, why is this consistent pattern of not getting enrollment correct? Thanks, Kalina. So there it is. Yeah, a picture is worth 1,000 words here. So here we have the community colleges in the blue, the CSUs in the green. Everything pretty much to the right is a negative. That is a projection miss. And the numbers are the projection miss in FTE, full-time equivalent students. And you see, particularly for the community colleges, most years, it's a big miss. And that's all revenue that did not materialize because the projection was wrong. So there's a consistent pattern of this for the system, but particularly for the community colleges. And somebody needs to ask why, I think. What methodology is being used? What numbers are being looked at? And who is doing the projections? because again, they've been wrong over and over and over again. In terms of finance also, if one just looks at between FY 20 and 23, the community colleges, that's over $46 million worth of tuition and fees, maybe closer to 50 that never materialized because the projections were wrong. But that's a problem. I think that's a particular problem if one is expecting to go to the legislature and the governor and ask for more money, because somebody could ask, well, your numbers are constantly wrong. Your projections have been wrong over and over and over again. So you got to figure that out. More troubling, and this is in my report. Please read the report. It's only 3 pages, including the graph and some recommendations. So it's a 10-minute read at most. In the substantive change proposal that was sent by the system to NESHE, the accreditation body, in March 2022, the report projected a 14.1% increase in enrollment at the community colleges from FY 22 to 23. 14.1% increase. That was the projection. That would have been historic, a miracle if that happened. Just 3 months later, in the Finance Committee report, the projected increase was 6.1%. Not even close to what was given to NESHE. The actual increase was 1.2%. So again, I don't know who made these projections. Were they 2 different groups that weren't talking to each other? But this needs scrutiny because it has, it certainly calls into question the methodology, the people making these projections, and the credibility of the system, quite frankly. And then again, certainly the other impact is the fiscal impact. This has been a lot of money that has not materialized because the projections have been wrong consistently. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Dr. Blitz, I believe you're next. Colleen, is that right? Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I think I am, and perhaps last. At any rate, I want to present briefly the FAC resolution on principles of respect. I'm going to try and put this up if I can. I don't know if you're actually seeing it now. I can't see what I'm showing. Is that correct?
Yep.
We can
Okay.
see it. If you can enlarge it, it would be great.
I shall give it a quick try. How's that? Okay, so I'll go over these points fairly quickly, but I want to stop especially at the question of systems of systems approach to the system itself. But the first point I want to make is the respect for the distinct missions of the colleges and the universities. As you know, this is a requirement of state statutes, section 10A1C. And we have communicated with Chair Ryan on this, and she's indicated back to us that she's looking into this, what were the previous reports, and to share them with the other members of the board as well, if there are such reports, in order to bring them up to date. That's important because the colleges are not the same as the universities. And when they were merged in 2011, this point was highlighted by the legislature as one of the conditions for the merger, that there be a proper recognition of distinct missions, and how that has worked out, that remains to be seen. But I would add just one point, which was brought up by Rich Balducci at the Wednesday meeting, that is, say there's not only the distinct missions, but there's also the transfer articulation between the community colleges and the universities. This was one of the major reasons behind the merger, to facilitate this transfer articulation. And I think we know that it has proceeded extremely slowly, that the transfer articulation agreements are out of date and probably haven't been updated since 2017. So that's an important point as a corollary to this respect of the distinct missions, the transfer between the colleges and universities. Secondly, respect the autonomy and integrity of the constituent institutions. I can't underline the importance of this. The CSCU is a system of 6 institutions now, the 4 CSU universities, Charter Oak State College, and the now consolidated CT Community College. Each of these constituent units are fully capable of recruiting, retaining, and graduating students, providing them with the appropriate degrees from associate to, in the case of some of the universities, doctorates. We recommend the system of systems approach, or a federated approach, which combines respect for the autonomy and integrity of the constituent units, which are not simply subordinate parts. There's a big difference between a system which has subordinate parts, like the different parts of a car, and a system of systems, each of whose constituent units can function on its own. And that's the situation for the CSCU system, and I think we need to recognize it. I just mentioned in passing that the system of system approaches has been used very successfully by the US military for joint force actions, and also by the engineering community for large, complex projects. We examine this much more closely, and I think apply it in a sense of a federated system. Thirdly, respect for shared governance. This implies a willingness to fully take into account the expertise of faculty and staff and focus on mutual agreement rather than imposed solutions for needed changes in the system. And I often state this as we need to have communication and consultation that has been in the past quite lacking, especially prior to 2022. On that basis, and on that basis alone, can we begin to have cooperation based on mutual trust. And again, that is something that still remains to be built up. And only on the basis of that cooperation and trust can we have any degree of coordination that might be appropriate for the system of systems that is CSCU. The fourth point is to respect faculty control of curriculum and pedagogy. And I think that should be fairly obvious, but there have been cases, particularly with respect to the community college, where over the objections of faculty, courses and programs have been instituted. I'm not necessarily going to go into the details of them now for sake of time, but I think we're aware of what those were. And I would include in the question of curriculum and pedagogy, the mode of delivery of those courses, whether in person, on ground, hybrid, partially on ground, partially online, or fully online, whether synchronous or asynchronous. That's up to the faculty and their appropriate departmental and program bodies to determine, and should not be determined above that level because it is the faculty who know how that mode of delivery is appropriate to the content of their curriculum. Fifth point is to respect the relationship between the CSU leadership and the system office, the board, and the constituent units, colleges, and universities. I'm going to just focus on one aspect of it, which is what is the role of the Board of Regents? I may seem impertinent at this point in making a suggestion, but it's based at the very least on the 4 years that I've attended as an ex officio non-voting member of the board. It seems to me that we need to avoid two extremes. One is in which the board simply approves whatever the system office has proposed, and I think that has to be looked at much more critically. And I notice that that is beginning to happen in the last several meetings. So I think that's an improvement. Secondly, we also need to have some specific, avoid micromanaging. That is to say, the famous case of the CSC 101 course and various other instances where the board imposes a curriculum or other matter in the face of opposition by faculty and staff. What could be appropriate activities for the board? I mentioned 3 that strike me as the most important, namely advocacy for adequate full funding of the constituent units of CSU via block grants. Secondly, supervision of constituent unit presidents for balanced budgets, something which has been obviously neglected in one notorious case, and formulation of policies required by federal and state authorities. That should be, I think, sufficient for the major activities of the board to avoid either the extreme of micromanaging or that of simply stamp of approval. Finally, in 6, respect the role of the Faculty Advisory Committee. I'll go briefly over this. We had asked back in December of 2020, I think, for the restoration of in-person or video rather than merely written public comments, and that was done. We've asked for biannual meetings of the board and FAC, and we're in the process of doing that, and I think that's quite positive. We've also asked that there be included an FAC agenda item on BOR meetings where appropriate. That I think needs some further discussion. Chair Ryan has specified a certain position that the system office wishes to take, or the board itself, and I think that we need to still come back and have some further discussion on that point. That said, I think that in conclusion, the question of mutual respect, it's not something that we can simply decree or write up in a page and think that we've accomplished it. It is a rather laborious enterprise, and I think we've begun that. Certainly there are improvements with this board and with the system office leadership relative to the previous board and the previous system office leadership, but I think we still have some considerable way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Blitz. And Dr. Kalina, do you have anything further to say?
I do not. I will ask that you read the written version of my comments, just because it has the actual numbers that you can see. But I also just wanted to, because I didn't before, say how much I appreciate that we're meeting here today, and thank you all for being here.
Chancellor Chang, would you like to make some concluding remarks?
Are we concluding, or are we having more of a conversation about anything? I wasn't sure if the regions had questions or if others were going to kind of engage in some dialogue, but I'll follow whatever Professor Sasanker and you decide.
I do see that Michael Shea, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to support
make a comment if it's okay.
Sure. I just wanted to support what what Chancellor Chang was saying, which was I would love to hear what the board members might have heard that was new, and really appreciate your patience for listening and can see that you're all paying attention and really appreciate that. And I'm just wondering if anything that was presented was new information and I was wondering, and if it isn't, that's one thing, but if it is, I was just wondering what you think of anything that was new information for you today from the talks. I mean, I really want to commune with the board. I really appreciate the fact that we're meeting and would love to hear some actual conversation back and forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I see Marty reaching. Marty, please.
Thank you, Chair Ryan. This is a bit of an open question to the faculty and professors, and I appreciate the certainly a lot of introspection and research and hard work. This is a general question. There was a hypothesis years ago to do something and to bring things together. I've read through the 3 documents that I was forwarded by Pam Helene that you put together on enrollment and the other drivers, but there was a lot of assumptions made years ago, and obviously where we are today, these things didn't happen. This is what I heard. We didn't get the results we thought. We didn't get the outcomes, the financial outcomes, the enrollment outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. My question to you is, in the form of a discussion, was the plan wrong, or was the plan executed wrong in the past? And anyone could take that on.
Who wants to start?
I'm just
Stephen
looking
Adair
for a
should answer.
perspective here. I'm not looking for data or,
I'm just going to throw in something that's very interesting. I became part of this board in June or July of 2018. I became vice chair in 2021 and chair in June of 2022. The only people that were on the board at that time were Rich Balducci and Elise. All of you board members are new. So I
Right.
think there's a very bright and a new perspective that you're looking at. You're looking at the present going into the future, as opposed to looking to all the facts and things that happened in the past. And I know there are other people who want to say things, so I welcome that. But just be
Yep.
aware that some of us have not lived through material that was presented or referred to. So go ahead. Marty, I hope you're all set. And
Yeah,
Jim, I know.
the perspective will help me because while we didn't manage the past, we're responsible for it. So we've got to get things right. And I know that decisions were made in the past. They can't be 100% wrong. And I'm just trying to find out if the plan was flawed or was the execution flawed or a mix of both. I'm just trying to get some discussion with the faculty.
I can just very briefly and give it to someone else. The plan was flawed from the get-go, and it was not particularly interested in solving the problems that we actually faced. So we saw along the way were a lot of numbers thrown to justify the end result that was desired, but none of it added up. So this moment of crisis was almost inevitable from the time we first saw it. I know Fran had a hand and Mike.
Yeah, the plan was flawed. Its premises were flawed. That this merger, and keep in mind, originally this was all about saving money. Whatever tiny amount of money this merger might have saved has been dwarfed by the cost of the merger. Not only the financial cost, but the opportunity cost. And for 10 years, well, not quite 10 years, but at least 5, faculty and staff have been enmeshed in this thing and have not been able to pursue initiatives that might have actually addressed some of the problems facing the system and our students. So the plan was flawed.
Michael, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that's a great question, and I appreciate it. And I think Stephen Adair might have something helpful to say because he was chair during a lot of when this was happening. But I just want to say that your question indicates that you might understand where we're coming from, which is, we've had to deal with issues that seemed not listening to some of the things we were suggesting that we think would have
Right.
helped things go better. So we know there are new people there now, new people, but it's still a system where, we work in the trenches and we just see this stuff. We know what these students need. And it's, it's kind of frustrating when, but I really appreciate your question. And I would like to hear what Stephen might have to say in answer to it.
Jen also has a hand up.
Jim, I see Jim.
Oh, yeah.
I see.
Yeah, I do have a hand up. I don't know if anybody's calling on me or not, but shall I go ahead?
Go right ahead. I don't see
Yeah.
Stephen.
Okay. First of all, I appreciate the work that went into the reports that I've seen very recently. And as I went through them, I didn't get to see them until noon today because of other commitments I had earlier in the day. And I recognize that they are data rich, which is a very good thing. I recognize that they are analytical, which is a very good thing. But I haven't had the time to read through them with the care and deliberation that I think they deserve. So what I can say now is that I appreciate having gotten them, and I commit to responding at some point. And Joanne and I have talked and shared with a couple of you how we might do this. But it's just going to take some more time. I can't get through them in the time I had today to look at them. And it may be when I do get through them that there will be new perspectives that I encounter along the way. So I'll be reading them.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Joanne, I think Jen and Louis had hands up in response to the question before.
Okay, Jen, go ahead.
Stephen and Andre also do.
Okay.
And Lisa.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm sorry, I had
children here at the playground, so I'm so sorry I'm in my car. But I am an English professor from the Three Rivers campus, and I wanted to explain an example which I think directly answers the question of an unintended consequence of all of this. I was the English faculty expert who served on the PA 1240 Council from the very beginning of PA 1240. And a couple years after that happened at the Three Rivers campus, the Guided Pathways Initiative was being piloted, but it wasn't really discussed with the faculty. So what we were seeing was this dip in student performance, but what you didn't realize is that students were being placed in 5 classes. And these were students who were woefully underprepared for the rigor of college work. And that was when we had a full developmental program. And if you fast forward to today, what seems to have happened with the Guided Pathways advisors is there was a great number of them who were hired. And it seems to be that this plan is still happening where people are putting through PACT students who are underprepared in 12 to 15 credits of work at the same time that we are getting rid of our developmental program. And I wanted to talk about why, how this unintended consequence is impacting like a student as an example, but hundreds of students that I've seen personally over the years. And I'll be brief. So I have a student this semester who is in my English class. The student had a significant IEP in high school. The student is maybe operating at a reading and writing level of maybe 5th or 6th grade. And the student was in 15 credits and cannot successfully complete the coursework. But as we know, if students don't get through the coursework, at some point they have to pay the money back. So what's happening is we're pulling in students, we're removing developmental, we're pulling in underprepared students and putting them into too many classes. And they're failing and they're dropping out and they're frustrated, but no one's ever solved the issue back at the PA 1240 days when we had a representative from K through 12 to not pass along students to the community colleges who cannot read and write anywhere near a college level. So there's the fact that the faculty have been able to manage to do what we've been able to do in the last decade is amazing, because the students whom we're working with are generally underprepared and in too many classes. And there isn't any mechanism for the faculty to really weigh in on that reality. So I have the student as an example that I gave you who should have been in a maybe certificate program, but she is in way over her head. She's not offered any accommodations and she's struggling. So I think that that's an example of this idea of putting students into as many classes as possible and thinking that the benefit of the whole is to boost enrollment to get more federal dollars. But we're talking about students who can barely read and write. And I think there's a real disconnect about the types of students we actually have coming into our campuses. And I'll close with this. I met with Dr. B.L. Baker, who's the chair of Arts and Humanities. And he said to me, well, Jen, I don't understand what the concern is, because these students are just taking 6 credits of English, 6 credits of math, and 3 credits of college success. And I just was really shocked at the notion that someone thinks that we can take someone who's placed right into college English, who's writing at a 6th grade level, and not only get them through reading, writing, critical thinking, and information literacy in 15 weeks, but they also need the burden of 6 credits of math and college success. And there's such an incredible disconnect between what people say is college ready and what the reality is of the students who we have. So that's my kind of feedback to the question of the bigger issue. When we can talk about money and funding and enrollment and all of that, but the reality is that we have a system that is failing our most underprepared students who are voiceless. It is not an equity measure by any means. It is incredibly problematic, and these students are frustrating and overwhelmed, and they're going to leave us saddled with debt. So thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Louise? Go ahead, Louise.
He's muted.
You're muted, yeah.
Yeah, Louise, okay.
Sorry, thank you so much, guys, for your time. And I just had a couple of comments regarding this. I feel like my student perspective can kind of help when discussing this. I think it's important also to hear from the students, right? Because yes, faculty is important, but like, who are we actually serving? The students, right? So regarding the Guided Pathways Advisor, I think I have a unique perspective regarding this. just because of the fact that I started at a community college and now I'm in a state university. So I went through the process myself and I've seen it, the pros, the cons, and how this merger has, in a way, helped students and also like the different flaws that it has. You know, it's a new system, so it's not going to be perfect. But I do see that there is like good positives for it as a student. For example, as a student, initially I started school in 2021. You had to go through a whole application process if you wanted to take credits to another community colleges. I think as a student, that's super beneficial now that under one institution, you're just able to go from campus to campus and take classes without going through the bureaucracy of, hey, like I got to do this application, I got to do this, that. Also, regarding the guided pathways, um, from my understanding and how I've interacted with guided pathways advisors, is that you go to the guided pathways advisors, you set up an appointment, and you talk to the guided pathways advisors regarding your goals as a student. And based on that, they'll recommend you whether you want to be a part-time student or a full-time student. Initially, when I first started a community college, they recommended me to do 4 classes because they said that the workload was going to be a lot, especially coming. I went to a technical school, and if you guys know, a technical school, you're only in academics for, so there's 180 days in a school year. Half of that you're in your trade, the other half you're in academics. So, you know, it might seem that you're underprepared for a college curriculum, right? But in a way, I agree with them, but I wanted to push myself, so I decided to take 5 classes. So what I'm trying to get to is that, in a way, the way I see guided pathways advisor is like tailored to each student and the student's goals, and it really comes down to the student itself whether they want to take those credits or not, right? So I think it's kind of unfair, like placing all the blame on like the guided pathways advisors and putting the students through that, when at the end of the day, you know, we're all individuals. Even though you're a student, at the end of the day, when you're starting college, you're an adult. So the decisions you're making, no one's forcing you to take those classes, you know. So it's a decision you end up making yourself. So yeah, that's my comments, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Luis. I believe, Stephen, you had something to say?
Yes, thank you. And thanks to Mike Shade for calling me out. But yes, I wanted to respond to that question about whether or not the plan was flawed from the beginning. You know, and like any plan that's big and ambitious and multifaceted, unquestionably, there were varieties of views on that. The extent to which, and some people certainly took a position, some faculty, I think, took the position that the board had the authority and the power to make this decision, and it was up to us to sort of respect that. So as being chair of the FAC from 2012 to 2018 and continued service on that committee until 2020, it was overwhelming from the FAC the extent to which people thought that the plan was flawed from the beginning. If you did look back at the notes, you would find FAC reports twice a year, and much of them sort of focused upon what we thought were the fundamental kind of problems that are associated with the merger. Yeah, so we had a petition drive. We were expecting or hoping, we were hoping to have 500 signatures on it, sort of to the board, opposing the consolidation, and we quickly got 2,000. I don't remember the exact number of former presidents from the community colleges, but was it 15 or 18 or something like that of former presidents saying that they thought that the plan was flawed. Many of the community college foundations were. So I think it was pretty widespread, the extent to which people had the feeling that this was a bigger, maybe the largest merger ever in the country, and that it was unnecessary and a really big step for Connecticut to try to make.
Thank you. Andre, I see your hand, you're raised.
Yeah, Stephen actually stole my thunder. I was going to say pretty much the same thing, but the answer to the question is both. One, the plan itself was horrific, but worse than that, because whatever the plan is, of course, when you start implementing, you're going to have to make changes. You need to adjust. Problem is, in fact, the system, the whatever the administration made sure that, in fact, put in place processes and procedures that made it next to impossible to have any kind of adjustment, to receive any kind of feedback, to receive any kind of correction. And so it's both the plan itself and, of course, execution, because you execute a plan and you do adjust, but they made it impossible to do that. I mean, just an example is the curriculum process. Okay, used to be that faculty set up not only the curriculum but also the process to develop it. Well, this thing was handed to us, and it's absolutely horrific, and there's no way to change it. And people are just creating some procedures, to try to make it happen. This is in the community college system. So again, it's both.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has any comments to make?
Regent Wright has had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry for missing that. Go right ahead, Regent Wright.
That's okay. I've had a lot of connectivity problems today and sound problems, so I finally got through. But I did hear some things, and I appreciate that there was a comment about we have new people on the board, and I also agree. I'm not one of the new people. I've been on the board since 2014. But I appreciate that there are new people who can be enthusiastic about the direction we're going in. I also want to speak to the folks that were on the board from the time before I was on there, and that includes Regent Balducci. These are folks who've been very dedicated to the Connecticut state colleges and universities and put a lot of time and effort into working on the board. So I just want to put that in perspective. As I joined the board, there were some things that the board, the CSEU has always had financial challenges from the beginning. There may have been legislators who are more willing to sort of direct money our way, but there have always been inefficiencies in the system. So whether you agree with the consolidation plan or not, there have always been problems. I've been chair of the audit committee for a while now. And I think over time, there have been some improvements in how things are done. And there are more consistencies around throughout the system. But there has also been resistance. And I would say the resistance sometimes have come from both sides, from administration and from faculty. And that's been a challenge. I'm not an academic expert, but I know that the board has always relied on the data that has been presented to them. And sometimes the data that has been presented to the board is not always what has been presented to us from faculty and other administrators. So as a board member, that sometimes is a challenge. I agree with what Stephen said about when you have a very lofty plan, there are always going to be some challenges. So there is no such thing as sort of a big plan that you administer that goes smoothly. There will always be challenges. And some of the challenges that I've seen since I've been on the board, there have been some faculty that I've talked to who've been very respectful and very clear in what their perspectives are and been willing to see some of the good that has come out of the plan. And there have been other people who have not been willing to participate. When you're trying to drive change, it's very difficult when you have some individuals who are willing to work with administration and those who are not. The other challenge that has happened, in addition to the board turnover, there has been administration turnover over time. So with all that I'm saying is there is no perfect plan. Sometimes it's easy to say something was flawed from the beginning. And I agree, things didn't go perfectly. Since I was on the board, I think there were 3 different startups about, there was a students first and there were various iterations of that. But what I am saying is that I agree with what Joanne said, that we need to look forward and to reflect back on everything that was done wrong. I'm not sure what value there is in that. I do know now that we have a crisis now, and that if we don't work together and figure out a way that we can make what we have today effective, I do think that students will suffer. And I appreciate what Louise said, because I believe while things may not have gone smoothly completely, I think that some of the services that have been offered to the students have been very effective. And if there's room for improvement, we should focus on that. But I do not believe that the right course of action is to eliminate something because it hasn't gone perfectly.
Thank you. Yeah, Professor Blitz, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think that we need to look at lessons learned from what happened in the past so that we don't repeat the same mistakes again. And I think there was two things that struck me besides the flawed plan from its origin, namely to save $28 million, when the very committees that the system office set up in the summer following this showed that there wasn't $28 million to be saved. And we often put forward two slogans. One was review and revise. And that really did not happen. What I see today is an openness precisely to that, and even differences of opinion, which of course is something that we haven't had at meetings for a long time, and I think that's very positive. The other point is the over-centralization and what I termed the delocalization that the consolidation plan was based on. And I think that is an area where review and revision really has to be done, not looking back to the past, but looking forward to what's going to happen in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Carla, our other student representative, Carla, would you like to say something? Go ahead,
Hi,
Carla.
everyone. Hi. So I just kind of wanted to piggyback on some of that. I personally, as a student, feel a lot of hope. I know we're in a crisis right now, and I've kind of just entered learning about all what's going on here. But I do want to convey that I think from a student's perspective, we're not really feeling that much yet, which I think is a huge win. A lot of students don't really know what's happening with the budget, which is a good and a bad thing. But I think I want to commend everyone too for that. I think that's huge in its own. And I do feel a lot of hope that even though we're in this stage of everything, this could be a really great opportunity to reevaluate committees, oversight with all these new members and look at those fundamental issues that may have caused this, because this is the reality that we live in now. And I think we're coming together and working as a team is the only way we're going to get through this. But I do want to thank you all for coming from the students. So
thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Michael Shea, please.
Yes, thank you. So I just want to say that I appreciate everything Regent Wright is saying. In terms of former members and current members that have been a long time, I don't know Regent Wright very well, but I certainly know Rich Balducci, and I think he's been a huge supporter of not only CSU in general, but the students in particular. And I certainly agree with Regent Wright that we're in a crisis, and I just want to say, and that we need to work together, and I believe that that can happen well. And I just want to say that the one thing I hope someone can convince Governor Lamont of is that there is a lot of human resource potential in Connecticut that schools like our system tap, and who won't be tapped without those schools. So the funding, why someone needs to convince him that it is a smart thing to fund this. It's not like we're fat and we're wasted money. I mean, there may be some of that in various pockets, but overall, we've always been underfunded, especially given the COVID problem with students. Students are becoming coming to us less and less prepared. They need more and more attention. That's more and more services, more and more faculty time, more and more, personal attention in the classroom. And that's and the students also, every time the tuition goes up, they've got to work that many more hours in their minimum paying jobs, minimum wage jobs, in order to even come to school. And then they're trying to come to school, work more. I have students now who work 40 hours a week and go to school full time. It used to be if they went to school full time, they were working 25, maybe hopefully 15 to 25. And that was bad enough in terms of the time they then need to study and do their work. Now it's just a competition. It's going to create a negative cycle where we're going to get fewer students, going to have fewer graduates. Persistence is going to go down because if we don't have the resources to help the students in their first year when they come in, to get beyond some of the limitations they've had because of COVID and high school experiences, they don't stay. So it's an investment in the human potential and the human resources in Connecticut to make students, these people who won't go to school otherwise, productive citizens in terms of both employment and in terms of engaged citizenry and informed citizenry, and taxpayers who will boost the economy of the state. So it's a really short-sighted, penny wise, pound foolish approach to think that cutting the funds to the CSU is gonna save money. It's gonna cost the state a lot of unseen money that could be tapped and improve. We could be improving the state immensely if we had more resources to help more students. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and just for your information, our vice chair of our board, Jim McCarty, and I have met with the governor. I meet regularly with our legislative delegation from this region, and they're well aware of our goals, our needs, the resources that we have in this state, as far as our young people and our non-traditional students as well. So he's listening, and I know Chancellor Chang will share with you his meetings and his interaction with the governor and our leaders of our state politically. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ryan. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And Dr. Sasanker, I know your hand is raised, so go
Sure.
right ahead.
Thank you. And first of all, Carla, I'm so happy to hear you say that. It takes a lot of work, and there are a lot of sleepless nights over whether or not we're actually holding it together for you all. So very glad to hear that we've managed so far. But we are facing a cliff where, there are going to be that much less resources, 3 times less than we have this year, right? So, to speak to the issue of like what can be learned from consolidation, or even why we are talking about the process. The problem that we face is a political one. And I think this is less about pointing fingers at each other and talking about, relitigating it, and more about emphasizing, I think, what Stephen has already said, which is that we were asked to deliver something to the state and we did it, but it cost a lot. And now when we are in crisis because of the cost, because of we turned ourselves inside out. Even if it didn't cost a penny, we have provided something that was required of us on the timeline that it was required. And to leave us hanging at this moment, I think, is a terrible move, because it will decimate our services. So when you are having these discussions, I would encourage a little bit of that, that we ask for the investment that was necessary for a project this large. There was no state allocation for this project. It is a huge historic a project that had not a penny from the state invested into it. So let's ask for that, please.
Yes, well, thank you. Now, prior to having Chancellor Chang make some concluding remarks, is there anyone else who does have a wish to say something?
Me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Is that Rich?
Yes, it is.
Oh, Rich Balducci.
Yes, thanks for allowing me a few minutes. And that's what it will be, a few minutes. First, the numbers that were given initially, I appreciate. What I'm going to do is ask the Chancellor and our finance people to look at those numbers that were presented by faculty and staff, look at our numbers, make the comparison, and see where the pluses and minuses are, because that's important. Comments were made. I really appreciate Elise's comments. I think she did a great job. and hitting on several good points. We have to go back and take a look at where we are and where we're going. You know, in the past several years in the position I've had, I've done the job, excuse me, adequately, not to the greatest ability that I think I have, but over the last year or so, taking more of an interest and input, expecting more from our folks in the system office, expecting more from our folks in faculty and staff so that we can bring it together to take care of the most important people in this process, and that's the students in our college and our universities. We're going to have to move forward, and to do that, it should be done as a team. You can do it separately, but it never seems to work out. If we work as a team, agreeing and disagreeing, because we're never going to agree on everything, as was mentioned a few minutes ago, but agreeing and disagreeing and trying to resolve the disagreeing points, I think we can move ahead. I think this meeting, for me particularly, was very valuable, and I'm hoping as we do it, as we move forward, it will be even more valuable to both the board, to the system office, and to the faculty and staff.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Rich, we do appreciate you.
And we have just Regent James has her hand up.
Oh, yes, thank you. Regent James?
I'm sorry I can't do my video, and I will make this very brief. I'm a very recent regent on this board. The only reason I joined this board is because what was articulated to me is that what we are trying to do is provide a much better experience for our students and to prepare them for where they need to go in the future to earn a decent living. I have really found this session to be very informative and really agree with the comments that that have been made throughout this session in terms of the need for teamwork, the need to look forward, and the importance of understanding whatever mistakes we have made in the past so that we don't repeat them. So I see a very heavy lift in front of us, maybe more than I anticipated. But that said, very committed to us working together to do what's necessary to provide our students with the resources, the credentials, the knowledge that they need to be successful.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who would like to say anything or make any further comments? If none, I thank you all so very much. And Dr. Sasanker, thank you for organizing this. Chancellor Chang, I'm sure you would like to make some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Chair Ryan, and thanks to everyone on the FAC and on the board. I just appreciate everyone's engagement, and this is a positive step forward to be able to have this dialogue and to kind of break things down and see what we see together. And to just echo a lot of the comments that have already been made. Clearly, we are going to be more capable about solving problems together than we would be in silos. And as I've said since I got here, I'm always going to be at the table, and I invite everyone to be at my table, or I hope to be invited to other tables so that we can try to create solutions together, right? Because shared governance is shared responsibility and shared accountability, right? And at the end of the day, we're all here to try to help students, So I really just want to give a shout out also to Carla and to Luis. I mean, they're students, they're working. They had a 3-hour board meeting on Wednesday. They had a student meeting this morning. They had another meeting today. So you all, I owe you a sandwich and a soda, okay? Or whatever's within the ethical limit, I owe you that, or pizza, or whatever it is that you prefer. Because you folks represent the folks that we're here for. So you inspire us, you keep us motivated, and we are literally all here for you from all our different angles. So thanks, everyone. I appreciate you all. If I don't see you or speak to you before the brief Thanksgiving break, please do enjoy, please do rest. And, a lot of negative in the world, right? Let's be positive and let's show the world that we're a positive force and that we have a lot of really good things that we can do together.
Thank you, Chancellor Chang, and I must say we are very fortunate that you are our leader, and for that I know we count our blessings. And in the spirit of the season, I would like to thank everyone who participated in this joint meeting today. It was educational, it was insightful, and certainly laid out the need for everyone to be working together to support our students because we really are all in this together.
Chairman Ryan, can I just
Yes.
say, I also really appreciate everybody staying over and wanting to have the conversation about the meeting instead of just stopping at 1 hour. Thank you very much for your time, everybody.
You're quite welcome, and thank you for that. Since there is nothing further to say, although I'm sure we will have much to say as we move forward, I'd like to call for a motion to adjourn.
So
So moved. So moved.
Is there a second?
second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? We are adjourned and have a wonderful
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving and thank you.
Happy
everyone.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Madam Chair, you're